Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. I think there's a chance that the US government may about to once again create the greatest wealth heist in history. The previous one being in 1971 when Nixon stole the world's gold reserves. After World War II, the US dollar became the global currency. Almost every nation's currencies were backed by US dollars instead of gold, as US dollars were transferable into gold. But dollars are a lot more fungible than gold, along with other benefits, one being transportation. Gold is really heavy. But America had to fight communism, by any means necessary. We had communism take over the USSR, then Mao formed the Communist Party of China. It was spreading throughout the world and was making its way to Vietnam. It wasn't just Vietnam though, as the Soviets were glamorizing how amazing communism is and how they had actually launched satellites into space. Then the space race was on. Of course, it didn't take long until we discover about 100 million people died of famine under the communism regime, mainly through Mao and Stalin. Eventually, China did discover that free markets were much more prosperous for citizens. In 2001, China entered the WTO, and we saw the biggest reduction in global poverty ever. Between the Vietnam War and a mission to the moon, well, the government got through quite a bit of cash. It started to make some of the other nations think, how is America paying for all of this? Are they maybe using our gold? They wanted to claim their gold. I believe France actually had a massive ship in New York ready to collect gold, but then Nixon says, all bets are off. You can't have your gold. We're going to keep it. Tough luck. The world enters massive inflation. But what really happened is the value of the dollar just dropped out of the market. It just became a fiat currency and dropped all the way down to the value that people place on a dollar when it's only backed by the faith of the US government and nothing more. America got to reset the currency, paid for with all international gold. However, the rest of the world still has US dollars as their reserves, despite it no longer being backed by gold. On top of that, the US government could still print as much money as they wanted, without any input from other nations. In other words, every time the Fed prints money, it dilutes the value of a dollar for all holders, whether in the US or Cambodia. Except only the US government benefit from the printing, as they get to choose where to spend it, as they printed it in the first place. They also spend it at full value before said spending deflates the currency. Yes, this is very unfair for the rest of the world, but wow, what a deal America got, like a reward for winning World War II. On top of that, pretty much after it stopped being backed by gold, it went to being backed by oil anyway, due to the petrodollar. Wow, another amazing score for the US dollar. No wonder it's such a wealthy nation. But America kept printing to get through each crisis. The global financial crisis was a big one. It took a long time to recover from that, even with the inception of the smartphone industry to boost the economy. We were just about recovered before the pandemic hit. It was the pandemic that created this insane money supply, with so much additional debt and low interest rates and extreme monetary policies for extreme circumstances. The level of spending was really hard to judge, and they overshot. But probably better to overshoot than undershoot if it potentially meant your citizens or customers may face famine. But they printed too much, and we still have low interest rates, and now we're seeing the side effects, with inflation creeping up ever so fast. This was inevitable, as I was saying it literally all last year. Well, here it is, and it's not going away. How do we fight inflation? We raise interest rates. It's that simple. Raise them to whatever they need to, just like we saw the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Paul Volcker, do in the 80s. We were up around 20% interest. It worked. It forced a necessary recession and saved the currency. Right, and here we are now, already hearing about rate rises, except they're talking about 0.25% here and there. 0.25%? Not 20%. Even after such rate hikes, then we're still historically low, at rates that are usually at a level to stimulate an economy, not slow it down. The Fed can't raise rates though, as eventually the government will also have to pay interest on that national debt. If rates are raised even to something as high as 2%, it's ridiculous at how far off the government would be in its ability to afford that interest. The only way to pay for that interest would be to borrow more, getting further into debt, more inflation, rinse, repeat until the currency hyperinflates, thus ending the US dollar. You also have to wonder what other nations are thinking the way the US is treating the dollar. They don't want their reserves to go into hyperinflation. I mean, it's trillions of dollars. In times like this, usually I would say these nations would build up their gold reserves, transferring US dollars into gold, but the world is not the same. We've also tried gold before, and we now have a new improved gold. Cryptocurrencies. Well, only Bitcoin. The thing is, the US still have the reserve currency and can print it into oblivion if they so choose. It is inevitably over. They know this, but there is still a little bit of gas left in the tank before inflation really takes control of the currency. The Fed are able to take all the remaining value in the dollar and transfer it into something else, like Bitcoin. Except if they do, it will mean they no longer have a currency they have any control over. No more monetary policy. This is their last saviour of having some currency with value. Of course, Biden is on the ball as usual, and is only now issuing an executive order for a digital dollar. I think this is what we call too little, too late. At the end of the day, it's up to everyone what currency we use anyway. It's your money, your wealth, your net worth. You want to put it somewhere secure, safe, and reliable that you have control over and won't inflate or depreciate. Are you going to trust a fly-by-the-night cryptocurrency or an established, reliable, trusted, proven crypto? Trade your fiat dollars in for a fiat digital dollar, or use that fiat currency to buy Bitcoin. But what if Bitcoin starts going vertical before then anyway? What if other nations don't want to transfer their dollars to digital dollars with no proven value and return the global reserve currency to the US government? You don't know what the value of that currency will end up when it floats. It is incredibly difficult to float a new currency. But a global reserve currency? Well, that feels like that thing they do when they pull tablecloths off dining tables really quickly and all the plates and silverware remain in the same place. Except they have to do that, and then they have to put the tablecloth back on again without moving the plates and silverware. Does that sound easy? The US could just buy up all the Bitcoin they could, printing and printing US dollars until the currency has gone. Something like one Bitcoin may equal about $1 billion, but equally £1 sterling might also be worth $10,000. Although Bitcoin surged, it was also the end of the dollar that was collapsing. Just a side note, I think this might be about the same time I exercised my leaps. Wow, leaps were an awesome investment in hyperinflation, something I did also mention back last year. Okay, so if the US government did this, it would mean they've stolen all the value from all the dollars from every nation, organization, or individual holding US dollars. The Fed has this power, it always has, and right now it's starting to feel like all bets are off. But this is America. They wouldn't do that, would they? Well, not again. Right, again. Like I said, the government stole all the global reserves already. Of course they wouldn't steal all the dollar reserves too. For the record, I love America. I love what America was built on. I've even lived there for 2 years and visited over 40 states. I've studied the history of the country relentlessly, more than any other nation. I am for everything America was founded on and the Constitution. But this is not America. This is the overinflated government, who've become far too fat and can no longer afford to support itself. In 1913, the US Federal Reserve Bank was set up, with Chase Bank, which is the Rockefellers, JP Morgan, and the Warburg family. I'm sure we've all heard enough conspiracies associated with this bank, but I'm not sure if the Rothschilds actually were a part of it. This was the seed that allowed the government to grow into what it has become today, giving them control of the treasury. And here we are today, with an unconstitutional currency. Once the dollar dies and we move to Bitcoin, it means that monetary policy once again returns to the people, as it was intended, except in a way that was never conceivable. If the founding fathers of the US had Bitcoin back then you can guarantee that Bitcoin would have been the currency. Jefferson would have been one of the biggest Bitcoin maximalists. Be prepared out there. We're at the precipice of a new world. It is plainly clear that fiat currencies are gone, and a US dollar crypto is just another disguised fiat currency. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.